Remember that team from the first period anyway in Chicago? Well, that's what it looks like when they play a full 60 minutes. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome into Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, for the third time so far in 3 meetings in their history, take care of the Buffalo Sabres, this time at home, 5-1. Which, actually, come to think of it, isn't all that far off of the 5-2 score that Seattle beat Buffalo by the last time they came to visit Seattle, in the 11th game of last season. Man, that really does feel like it was a long time ago, and actually feels like even longer ago when you remember that was just after Eichel got traded from the Sabres. And even longer at that when you remember that that was also the game that the Kraken scored their first, and still only to this point, hat trick in Seattle Kraken history. Of course, it was Eberle that did it, and we're still waiting for number 2. But while there weren't any more hat tricks in this game, there were a couple of players that got pretty close. I mean, no one actually even got 2 goals, but there were a lot of opportunities that the Kraken didn't score on in this game, even with putting 5 in the net. And it all starts within the first few minutes of the game, as Sprong, who's been in and out of the lineup, but was definitely in for this one, gets the puck up along the boards to Gord, who was back after missing a game for personal reasons, and he just kind of dumps the puck into the offensive zone on his way off for a change, because, you know, what the heck, get into the offensive zone, and you never know, maybe a guy like Sprong, even though he doesn't have the fastest feet out there, can win a foot race to the puck, and he does, and he's going to get a shot off from next to the net, but the save is made. But that's okay. I mean, it still was a good rush chance early on in this game, and from the 4th line, no less, and a guy that, again, has been in and out of this lineup early on in the season. Plus, the shot was from a tight angle, and the rebound's right back out to Sprong. He isn't quite able to get another shot off, but what he can do is get that puck passed back to Alexiak, entering the zone wide open. Alexiak has all the time and space in the world to pick his spot, take his shot, and bury it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead just over 2 minutes into the game. It's the big rig right down Main Street for his first of the season, with Sprong and Gord both getting the assists. Of course, it also certainly helps that Buffalo, who, in spite of what we see here, has been off to a pretty strong start this season, especially defensively, as we know, aided by their Matty Beniers counterpart in Owen Power, did kind of blow it defensively on this play with all 5 of their skaters right up around the net, which isn't going to really do all that much for you, and Alexiak is able to put that puck right in between 2 of them and into the back of the net. And so now with that, for the second game in a row, the Kraken are off to a, well, for lack of a better word, Kraken start to this game, and it doesn't stop here, as although they do spend some time in their defensive end and play effective, maybe not terribly well organized looking, but effective defense, they are able to get out of their end and transition the other way. It's Tanev who rainbows a backhand shot all the way from one blue line to the other, and who's there to pick it up but Morgan Geekie, who's back in the lineup as well on top of Sprong and Gord. Geekie beats Power for a one-on-one chance with Comrie in net, and he beats him to bury the puck and give the Kraken a still early 2-0 lead. It's again an absolutely beautiful rainbow backhanded pass from one blue line to the other by Tanev that sets up Geekie on this breakaway. And Geekie, not that every Kraken breakaway was finished this game, and this wouldn't be the only one that Geekie would get, but he does finish this one. And again, the Kraken, for the second game in a row, an early 2-0 lead. Which, saw how that turned out in Chicago. So now, even though they're up 2-0, it doesn't feel like this game is over, and it's time to keep that foot on the gas and going forward. And to their credit, that's exactly what they're able to do, as just a few minutes later, they get what was probably, even though it doesn't turn into a third goal, the best series of scoring chances that they had in this entire first period. They're able to keep the puck into the offensive zone, which they were able to do a fair amount in the first period. It gets down towards the net where Burakovsky nearly is able to poke it past Comrie, but Comrie's able to pat it out to the side, and it ends up out behind the net, which the Kraken are able to get it out from there. And just a couple passes later, Burakovsky gets it out to Wennberg, who has a wide open chance from the slot, but another save is made by Comrie. Still, the rebound is loose, and this time it's Bjorkstrand who just can't quite get his stick to it, as Buffalo's defense does come up here in the end to keep the puck out of the net. Still, the Kraken knocking on the door for that third goal just halfway into the first. Not long after all of that, the Kraken would end up getting their first power play of the game, which, although it did keep the offensive zone for the first 30 seconds to maybe not quite a full minute, but either way, it doesn't lead to another goal. and if anything, kind of started to kill this momentum that the Kraken had been building up over the first period. And eventually, the Sabres end up getting a power play, which also doesn't really go much of anywhere. Those two power plays, if anything, kind of evening up the momentum of the game. So then, heading into the second period, again, the theme here is going to be keeping the foot down and not just settling for preventing Buffalo from scoring, but trying to keep scoring yourselves and put this game farther and farther out of reach. So even if you do have those lapses like we saw in Chicago, which ideally we'd like to not see, they don't allow Buffalo to not only get back in the game, but take leads, like we saw the Blackhawks able to do. And although Buffalo did get off to a little bit of a better start right out of the gates in the second, Seattle's able to flip that momentum right back around and start to really push things back towards the Buffalo end of the ice in a consistent manner like we saw them doing in the first. And eventually, it all accumulates in the third goal of the game. Now, in our time as Kraken fans, even this season, but especially early on last season, we've seen our fair share of careless defensive play, not just by defensemen, but also by forwards in the defensive end. And that is just what leads to the third goal in this game, though this time it's in Seattle's favor, and it's some questionable defensive play or play in the defensive zone from the Sabres. Now, the play all starts with a chance up by the net by Sprong that is saved, and the puck ends up behind the net, where it's going to get cleared out by Buffalo's defense as they start their transition. Hinnistros has the puck up along the boards, and as he's exiting his defensive end, he just decides to throw a backhanded pass out into the middle of the ice, because only his players could possibly be there to get it, right? Wrong. Tanev happens to be standing right there, which he would probably have seen if he had bothered to look up before passing the puck, and Tanev just kind of says, okay, buddy, sure, puts his stick out. The puck goes off of Tanev's stick and down into the middle of the offensive zone, where who else but Sprong, who just had his first shot saved, is waiting for it and thinks, all right, sweet, a second chance, don't mind if I do. And sure, he might not be an everyday starter for the Kraken, at least at this point in the season, but when you allow a guy with a shot like Sprong has to have not just one, but two chances from right in front of the net pretty much uncontested, you might be able to stop one, but you're not going to stop both. And Sprong is able to score here on the second one to give the Kraken that 3-0 lead just a few minutes into the second. Now, I will say that although I said in the open the Kraken played a full 60 minutes of great hockey, that isn't necessarily entirely true, as after this third goal goes in, they aren't quite able to keep up that momentum and things start to even out and then even start to turn in Buffalo's favor as we get into the back half of the second. And as now the Sabres start to build their momentum, although Jones was able to bail the Kraken out a couple of times and they were playing still decently defensively in front of him for the most part, eventually it's one chance too many as Hinnistros, who was eager to make up for his mistake just a few minutes earlier, fires off a shot fresh off a change from up by the blue line, and while that shot is saved by Jones, who sees it all the way, the rebound goes right out next to the net where only Dylan Cousins is there, and he is unfortunately able to get his stick to it first, tap it into the net to put the Sabres on the board and make this a 3-1 game. Is it a bit of an unfortunate bounce that goes right to Cousins that leads to the goal? Sure, but again, it didn't come off of just one random push that the Sabres had in between a whole bunch of Kraken pushes at the other end. This was some sustained pressure that the Kraken kind of allowed the Sabres to build as they, again, kind of let that foot off the gas a bit. Also, real quick, game aside for a second, it is a bit unfortunate that it happened to be right around this one goal that Buffalo scored, but as I was watching back the highlights, to get ready for the video and all that, I happened to notice something right before this Buffalo goal. Just taking a closer look here as Buffalo sets up in the Kraken end. What's that down in the corner? Wait, is that me? Yep, that was me and my wife down along the boards for the second period of this game, thanks to a connection through my wife's work. Easily the best seats I've ever had for a game. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, at least for me anyway, as easily the closest I've ever been to NHL action. Yeah, I mean, at least before tonight anyway, the closest I'd been to NHL action was in the upper deck or press box, I guess, depending on what you consider closer. Either way, neither one's very close to the action. So yeah, this was definitely a pretty awesome experience. And again, not one I'm probably likely to have anytime soon, but shout out to JT. You know who you are. Thanks for the opportunity to be up by the boards for this one. Fun game to do it for, by the way. Though I will say, not to complain by any means though, as I would happily sit there again, if you are trying to get really the full ice view, it is a little bit hard to see what's going on at the other end of the ice. But still, amazing seats and NHL action up close like that. These guys move around much faster than it looks like they do on TV, which already looks pretty fast. Anyway, me and my wife's fortune aside, as we get back to the game, again, the Sabres just put one in the net to make it 3-1, and on top of that, they really seem to have all the momentum going in their favor at this point, which, for those of us still remembering how things went in Chicago after the Kraken looked like the better team for most of the game, it's starting to feel a bit iffy, and there's definitely a little bit of nerves even with a 3-1 cushion. However, the good news is Seattle does respond right away and push back into the offensive end after the faceoff, and while they don't score, they do draw a penalty. And on that power play, just about a minute in, it's done down to Burakovsky, all the way across to the other side. One touch pass to McCann, who does think for a second, but then he roofs the shot into the back of the net. It might have gotten deflected off of a block in front of the net, but either way, it pops the net, and it did bounce out of the net pretty quick. So the horn and the celebration by the Kraken on the ice was pretty immediate, but the horn and crowd reaction was all a little bit delayed. Either way, it ends up happening, and the score is 4-1. This one is not coming off the board. So now that it's 4-1, we can all just take a nice deep breath and know that the Kraken can't possibly blow this lead, right? Well, they do kind of make it interesting for the next few minutes of play, as there isn't a lot left here in the second period, but what there is left is enough to give the Sabres a power play that spends the vast majority of the time in the offensive end. The Kraken, thanks to Jones, are able to kill this one off and get to the end of the second period with the score still 4-1. But then as we start the third period, Buffalo doesn't take long to, once again, end up back on the power play. And on that Buffalo power play, as the Sabres control the offensive zone and pass the puck around the outside looking for a good shot, a Tage Thompson pass up to the point is stolen by Kuhlman. He's got a free breakaway down to the other end of the ice, and his shot is saved by Comrie. It's a nice save, and Comrie's able to get it back out to Thompson, who's circling back. I'm sure sighing a little bit as, that could have looked really bad for him. But wait, Kuhlman stole the puck from Thompson again, and this time doesn't opt for the shot, but instead passes it down to Gord, who just can't quite get his stick on for what would have been an easy tap-in goal for the shorthander. And the Sabres, and specifically Tage Thompson, dodged two big Kuhlman bullets here and survive this to get the puck down to the other end of the ice. And as this transition happens, which it can when you don't score shorthanded like that and commit two of your players to that attempt, the Kraken have to kind of interfere a bit to prevent the Sabres from getting a good attempt of their own. The ref hand goes right back up. And so now, not only did the Kraken come up empty on two grade A scoring chances shorthanded, but they're about to be 6-on-4 as Comrie leaves with the delayed penalty, still on the power play. And before the Kraken can touch the puck, which still would have sent it to 5-on-3, the Sabres are able to find the back of the net. It is a pretty nice play by Owen Power that sets up the whole thing, and although he isn't the one that scores the goal, he did actually get a pretty good shot off that ended up going off the post. I think he still may have ended up getting a secondary assist on this goal, but ultimately, we'll never know, because it turns out Power, who again started the whole play, brought the puck into the offensive zone offside. Just barely offside, but video review shows that it was in fact offside, and this one comes off the board, so the Kraken, take a deep breath, dodge a bit of a bullet there. Although that being said, they're still now going to have to kill off 30 seconds of 5-on-3, because the second penalty is still going to happen. And then even if they are able to kill that off, there's still another minute and a half of power play after that. Fortunately, however, Seattle is able to kill off all of that time, and we get to the end of both of those without another puck in the back of their net, which, again, you've seen the final score, so you already knew that. And finally, I'm sure somewhat energized from that excellent kill there after the called back goal, the Kraken pushed down to the other end of the ice, and while, again, it doesn't immediately score a goal, it does draw what would end up being the last penalty of the game and the last Kraken power play. And while the first power play unit wasn't really able to get too much going, the second power play unit does eventually find the back of the net, as they are, thanks to Beniers, able to get set up into the offensive zone. Schultz with the puck fakes a shot and instead passes it down to Beniers, who takes a shot himself. It goes off of a... Excuse me, my voice must still be recovering from the smoke or cold or whatever. Anyway, Beniers' shot, which is coming from a tight angle, goes off of a Sabre stick between him and the net, takes a bit of a fortunate bounce there, and ends up going off of the back of Comrie, so I guess another fortunate bounce, and into the back of the net. It's not necessarily a clean goal, and I'm not even sure Beniers was actually trying to shoot it. I think he was trying to pass it net front here. Either way, though, he fired the puck towards the net, and especially when you're as good as he is, when you do that, sometimes good things happen. It takes a couple of fortunate bounces, gets him his third of the season, and puts the Kraken up 5-1. Which at this point is pretty much out of reach unless just a total collapse happened, which it doesn't. In fact, after one more decent push by the Sabres right after the faceoff, the rest of this third period is rather uneventful, and we do eventually get to that final score of 5-1 without really too much stress, which feels nice. So in the end, ultimately for the Kraken, not only a very solid 5-1 win over a team that came into this game hot in the Sabres, but also exactly the type of win that we needed to see from them after that loss in Chicago. Again, much like that game in Chicago, they got off to a hot start in this one with that 2-0 lead and really dominating the first period up until maybe the last couple of minutes where they started to slip a bit. This time, however, as we got farther into the game, they didn't let their foot off the gas quite like they did in Chicago and didn't allow those mental lapses and quick 1-2 goals like they did for the Blackhawks. Although they weren't perfect, again, a little bit of a slide there in the back half of the second, they only allow the one goal, and the few times that they did allow the Sabres to get things going a little bit, including that one goal, they were able to respond right away and not just allow that one mistake to compound into more. And so now all we have to do is wait and see on Thursday if the Kraken can continue this strong play against a mightily struggling Canucks team that's coming into town. The Canucks team that Seattle should very much be able to beat if they play the way that they have in the first period in Chicago and all of this game, not to mention all of the Colorado game, but also one that I'm sure is pretty eager to start getting things turned around themselves, if in fact they can. And finally, as for the Kraken 3 stars in this game, you know what? Honestly, you can take your pick down in the comment section. Really, any combination of 3 Kraken players could be the 3 stars in this game, and you could make a decent argument for them. Guys like Dunn, Larson, Alexiak, Jones, Beniers, Eberle even, all pretty much, again, everybody had a great game in this one. But if there are 3 guys that really stood out above the rest, 2 of them certainly have to be the guys that have been in and out of the lineup and were in it this one. Those being Sprong and Geekie. Now, Sprong is going to get the first star. He has a goal and 2 assists in this one, and could have easily added on to that, both with more assists and with a couple more goals. One of the guys that could have had a hat trick if, he'd gotten lucky, I guess, a couple of times with some bounces. Geekie also gets a point or 2 points on a goal and an assist, has that breakaway goal and had another couple of net front chances. I don't know if he was necessarily on hat trick watch or anything like that. Again, he doesn't get a second one in. But still a fantastic game from Geekie for another guy that's been in and out of the lineup, especially a younger guy. And then the third star, I mean, if you have the opportunity to pick Tanev as a star, how can you not? Especially with the 2 passes he had. One of them, granted, was a bit gifted to him by the Sabres, but that rainbow backhanded pass from blue line to blue line in the first was just a thing of beauty. And even outside of that, again, Tanev has just been an absolute ball of energy like we saw at the beginning of last season throughout the start of this season again. And yes, I know that picking those 3 means that I didn't pick Jones, who only allowed 1 goal as a Kraken goalie, and that's something we'd like to see a lot more of. But to be perfectly honest, although he did come up with a couple of pretty big saves, he could have let in 2 or 3 more goals, and with how much pressure the Kraken were putting at the other end of the ice, yes, even with how the Chicago game went, that there was really much way the Kraken were losing this one with how they played this game. That said, again, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section. What other players you might pick as stars and why. Again, you could pick just about any one of the 20 guys out on the ice. And until that game against the Canucks, which hopefully goes at least as well, if not better, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you liked or enjoyed this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until we see the Canucks, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.